Zach is with us. He has this company called Startup Comms. Zach and I have spent some time together in Charleston and really has done an amazing job. And you've seen probably some of his coaching video on the website. And I know technically what we're doing here is we're reaching out to him. He should be...
I'm here, yep.
Oh, there you are. Excellent. How you doing, Zach? Excellent.
Great, Trey. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for rallying and being with us here this morning. And or actually now it's the afternoon. Really had, as you saw, some great content from other pitch coaches like yourself. I can't wait to dive into this final deep dive into figuring out how to be the best at delivering what is valuable to us, to people that we want to engage and add value to our world as well, and to create a win-win for us as business partners.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I really appreciate you having me on here. It's really exciting. I mean, meeting you and spending time with you in Charleston and doing the videos, definitely one of the highlights of my year so far.
Oh, great. Nice.
What you're doing for startups, when you're, I think you and I share the same type of passion where there are startups around the world who have perhaps the best products or the best teams and the best ideas that could really change people's lives.
You're right.
But the way that they can actually get resources is way more difficult for them than maybe a more established company with lots of money in the bank. Yeah. And so I think what you're doing and also what I'm trying to do with Startup Comms is just a huge service to the entrepreneur community. And I love what you're doing. I love being a part of this. So I want to thank you for that. You're really inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the appreciation is mutual.
Yeah, that's great. So I think it seems fitting, at least for me, to kind of have this part of the presentation at the end. So I think what's important today is to talk about, you have these ideas, you have these messages or really important parts of your business that you want to communicate, whether it's to an investor, whether it's to a partner, or whether maybe you have a new product or service or pivot or fundraising round that you want to announce. When you're thinking about these things, about telling that story or conveying that message, I believe very strongly that there are 3 simple questions that you want to answer before you start to try to deliver that message. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about the message could be as simple as an email. It could be as grand as a holistic communications and marketing campaign. If you take these 3 questions and you can answer them very succinctly and very clearly, you're probably going to be in a lot better position to deliver a concise message, number 1, to deliver it to the right audience, number 2, and to deliver it in a way where that audience is really going to resonate with that message. Mm. So I think those 3 questions that are really important are this. So it's, what do you want to say, right? Who do you want to say it to? Who is your audience? And 3, how do you say it? Now, when I talk about what you want to say, I think it's very important to kind of start with that as your beginning. Because if you're thinking first, who's my audience? You have and you touched on this before, but you have maybe the tendency to kind of lose who you are because you're already thinking too much about your audience.
Right.
So I think you really want to start first with who I am. What do I want to say? What is important to me? What is important to my business? And when you're thinking about that, also doing a couple other checklists, does this idea or message, does it align with my principles or my business's principles? Does it align with my mission? Does it align with my value system? You never really kind of want to stray from, of course, you've got to pivot, you have to evolve, but typically you don't want to stray so far outside of yourself or of your business's identity that you could create confusion in the market. As you know, everything lives online today. I could find out anything about anyone, about any company from the beginning to the end of time. So people like to see this nice, consistent paper trail. So it's good to make sure your message aligns. And then you also have to think about, why is this message important for me or for my company to be communicating? When you think about that, you probably get a little bit of a better idea about how to frame that message. Then when you move on, so let's say you have an idea of what your message is. Now you want to say, okay, now who is my target audience for this message? And I think that helps refine the message in a couple ways. Particularly, you want to make sure that the target audience that you're talking to, whether, again, investor, partner, customers, general market, media, anybody, you want to make sure that they actually care about this message. Right? It's very natural to become very excited about something you've been able to accomplish, or to want to talk about something you believe in. But you definitely want to make sure that whoever you're communicating this to, they care about that too, right? Like they find that exciting as well, or they probably would if they heard it. And then you also want to make sure, if you're thinking about the audience, to take a step back and say, is this audience important to my business, and why? So of course, investors are important to your business, but what kind of investor is important to your business? As you know, there's lots of different kinds of investors. There's very active investors. There's investors who invest in certain types of technology, whether they're green technology, sustainability, or they're fintech, or, you don't, so it's not just investors. You want to make sure, why is this target audience important to my business? And that'll help you, again, think about the message and then refining it in a way that's going to really impact the audience you're trying to deliver it to. And those two questions, I think you should probably ask yourself, or your team. Sit your team down in a room, your communications team, your exec team, whoever helps align the business and moves the business forward. It's very important to kind of have people involved. I mean, the more the better. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
But the more the better. And then to ask these questions over and over and over again. So you're asking the question, what do you want to say? And then you write it down on the board, right? Then you say, okay, what are we really trying to say here? And try to really get down to a very refined point. And then with your audience, you actually kind of want to grow your parameters there, or your filters there, so you're reducing your parameters, kind of thing. And once you kind of have that locked down, then, and I think only then, should you move on to, all right, now how are we going to convey this message? How are we going to tell this story? And I mean that in a couple different ways. So one, I mean, what format is this story, or is this message most, is it the best fit for, right? What is the most natural way to tell this story? And you could really kind of play on that a little bit. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the New York City Library did this amazing thing on Instagram, with those novels, right? I mean, like that makes no sense. That's not natural, but it's brilliant and it worked beautifully. So, I mean, these are kind of rules of thumb that, you want to be the exception to the rule. That's great. But generally, you want to make sure that the story that you're telling can be told in a way that is very natural for the channel. Like you wouldn't get up on stage and you're pitching some business. And then you start Instagramming, right? I mean, that's an obvious extreme example, but you also wouldn't maybe try to, do Instagram posts on Facebook or Facebook on YouTube. And also you're on WatchPitch, right? You have 1 minute. And I think to Juan before, he talks about people make their decisions so quickly. 1 minute might sound short, but it's not short. I mean, there's a lot you can communicate in that 1 minute. So if you're thinking, all right, the best way for me to communicate with my investors or partners is through WatchPitch, you got to understand that channel and make sure that your message and your audience is right there on WatchPitch. And then you want to also think about this more holistically. So I think it definitely, I think any startup needs to be on WatchPitch. Outside of that, should every startup be on Instagram? I'm not sure. Should every startup be on LinkedIn? Should every startup or any business be putting out press releases to the Wall Street Journal? I mean, the very easy answer there is no. You have to really try to make sure, what do you want to say, who do you want to say it to, and what's the best channel? Because then you're going to have a much more natural fit for that message that you're trying to convey there.
I can imagine too that how critical it is that that you're very keen on that outcome as well, because so much of once that's been delivered, you want to get some kind of feedback that I'm on course here, and they can now take action. Whether it's in the case of WatchPitch, we've never created WatchPitch to be a closing tool. It's always been designed to be an opening tool, so that now this is a conversation that can continue. so that now we can actually perhaps take the time and all the resources that are involved with a face-to-face meeting and putting people into a room together and now having that next level conversation. And then, of course, the things that maybe you're delivering in a 60-second watch pitch are genuinely going to be different than the ones that you do in that 3 to 5 to 8 minute pitch that you normally have in a room full of investors. So I can see how that messaging would also change and adjust along the way.
But I think that's a really important point, actually, that I'd like to just take a second to dive into a little bit.
Sure.
So, you're thinking about like that call to action, right? So if you have a really good idea of what your message is, right? Like you want to communicate that there's a very real problem, there's a big market opportunity, there's a real problem, and you can solve that. Mm-hmm. And you will understand who is going to care about the fact that I can solve this problem. When you then deliver that call to action, when you've landed that message and you're invoking some sort of emotional response, you're talking to people's fears, aspirations, or their business acumen or their sense. When you land that, I think you're 100% right that you got to deliver that call to action. And if you have a good idea, a really defined idea of what you want to say, who do you want to say it to, and you know the channel that you want to say it, delivering that call to action becomes way easier and way more efficient. And you definitely are going to get a lot more out of that time. So particularly on, think about WatchPitch, you deliver that call to action after those 60 seconds. If you've already delivered the right message to the right audience, that call to action is in the right place, right?
Yeah.
You're giving that call to action to the people who want to take that action. So I think that point's brilliant. I mean, it's really well said.
Nice. Well, tell me, Zach, we are going to actually talk about some of the calls to action that I'd love everybody who's been watching this live event to take. And before we do that, if people want to find out specifically about what you do and what you bring in terms of value to both individuals and organizations, how do they find out about you? And of course, we'll include this, but I want to be sure we get this communicated now.
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to even be able to talk about that.
Oh, gosh, absolutely, sure.
My background, as you know, Trey, my background has been more corporate. So I've worked for really big companies all around the world and for great firms and all that, and got to do some really exciting work. And then I started wading into the startup community before I fell in love with it. And the idea of startup comms, startup, which is just STAR TUP comms.com. The idea of startup comms is to take that model and those resources and that high quality communications and marketing and make it available to startups in a way that they can access and that will provide immediate and long-term value for them. So I think really all people have to do is go to startupcomms.com. There's actually a form there. They can fill out their information. We'll write them a free press release to kind of get them started. Or they can go to my personal LinkedIn. I post a lot there. I like to engage and talk to people. And that's just LinkedIn/Zach Giglio, ZACH GIGLIO PR. And that's it. They can connect with me there. If you just want to talk or connect, send me a message. I'm usually pretty responsive and excited to talk to people.
Solid, Zach. Thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this. I feel so grateful to have each and every one of you, and especially you in this mix. So thank you again for taking the time there in Charleston.